Greetings duelists and welcome to another video. So this is going to be deck report week 3 after post ban list. So this past weekend on May 5th it was what is called the King of Games Invitational series. This is basically an event held for people that have topped the multiple tropical island challenges. As you can see here by this mat, I did win the second one. That what happened on May last year. So exactly 1 year ago, it was when I won this mat. And then I made top 8 on the January Tropical Island Challenge, which was the fourth one that they held. And this past weekend was the fifth event. I was not being able to participate on the fifth Tropical Island Challenge. However, I did play at the Invitational event. So going into that event, basically, like I mentioned previously, it is an invitational only event. So only players who has topped or won previous island challenges can play that event. That being said, I was expecting high caliber players. I was expecting more of the meta matchups and nothing like too obscure and rogue. One deck that I had at the back of my mind was the Tenpai Dragon deck. Other decks that I had in mind were Snake Eyes, Voiceless Voice, maybe some Branded, maybe some Melodious. And my hunch was correct. A lot of Tenpai players were at that event. That was the most popular deck in the room. And surprisingly, not a lot of Snake Eye. There was a couple of voiceless players. There was one Rescue Ace, which was also surprising. Um, Overall, very expected event. I am going to showcase my deck choice and then I'll talk about my standings. So the deck I chose to pilot for this event was the Labrynth Unchained deck. It's been a while since I showcased this deck on this channel. The last time I played this was like on late November, which was at a PS5 tourney, and I almost won that event with this deck. A lot has changed since this deck's performance at that event. We did had a Forbidden Limited list that did touch a key card that is in this strategy. We had two ban lists since then, but we also have gotten new support that also helps this deck. The number one reason I picked up this deck, like I mentioned previously, was because I expected a lot of Tenpai. I expected a lot of like Voiceless Voice. I expected a good amount of Snake Eye, and outside of Snake Eye Fire King, which has dropped into popularity a significant amount, this deck has a fair matchup against like a lot of decks, at least a lot of the current ones. And Tenpai Dragon was the most popular deck in the room, and it is the easiest matchup for this deck. So my hunch was correct. I did face 3 Tenpai Dragons in Swiss at that event. I'll talk more on that later. But yeah, I'll be showcasing the list, and then I'll talk about like stuff that were different from the last list that you saw with this deck, and just a lot of things that you need to like learn about. So for the Labyrinth monsters, we have Ariana, we have Chandelier, we have Stovey, Lovely Lady, Butler, and Kuklok. If I'm not mistaken, I think this was the right same ratio I played last time, and maybe with the exceptions of 2 ladies instead of 1. But since this is not a pure variant, I am going to stick with this ratio. I think this ratio is perfectly fine for what this deck is supposed to be doing. If it was a more pure Labyrinth deck, then maybe some other cards at higher numbers, like maybe higher numbers of Butler, Lady, Kuklok, so on and so forth. There's another other reason why you don't need to play like multiple Kukloks anymore. You will see it with this list. But that's it for the Labyrinth monsters. I think that's 13. For the Labyrinth traps, we have 3 welcomes and 1 well, 1 welcome and 3 big welcome. I don't think this ratio is gonna change anytime soon either. As again, this is not a pure Labrynth deck. If it was, then you would play more copies of this. You'll play 1 copy of the field spell. I did contemplate playing the field spell. Maybe in the future I might actually play it in this list. Um, I'll talk more on that later. So for the Unchained portion, we're playing 3 prison, and then we're playing 1 of each name, 1 of each trap. In previous lists in the past, we used to play 3 Trivara, 3 Aruha. Trivara is now limited in the Forbidden Limited list, so we can no longer play multiple Aruha. As far as Trivara, my bad. As for Aruha though, I felt with the loss of Trivara, the Unchained engine was not going to be as potent like in multiple numbers. I still wanted to play the Unchained package in this deck because it does give you a lot of resiliency. It gives you a very strong going second like strategy as well. But there is a new engine in this deck that we are playing that kind of replaces the number of these cards because it makes it easier for you to get to like your Unchained engine without needing to open any Unchained cards. Prison is like the best one because Prison can get you to all these, but Prison is also good because even if you draw multiples, it can get your Unchained engine started without having to fear redundancy. I also don't mind like opening one of these Unchained names because any of them also serve a purpose. So that's it for Unchained package. So now what we're going to be playing is a new engine that just came out from Legacy of Destruction. That engine is going to like heavily influence future deck designs for this particular like variant or this particular deck moving forward, and that engine is the Nightmare Throne engine. So this engine consists of 3 Nightmare Throne and 3 Squirmer. I'll talk about Squirmer first, and then I'll talk about Nightmare Throne. So for those who don't know, a comment from Legacy, what this card does is if you control a Fiend monster, as a quick effect, you can special summon this from your hand, and then optionally blow up either itself or another monster that mentions Jubel in like their card text. So what does this card do for the deck? So this is now another extender for the deck. So the deck can now easily access to Yama, which means it can access to his Unchained engine a lot quicker. But the other thing this card does is that as a quick effect, it can special summon and optionally blow up itself. The reason that comes up is because if you have Yama in your graveyard, you can use Squirmer to special itself, pop it, and then have Yama to be triggered and have Yama bring back a guy. And if you have like for example your Unchained trap set, you can use the Yama effect to pop your own Unchained card or pop your own Unchained monster and then use that to summon Abominable, and then Abominable becomes an interruption on your opponent's turn. So if you ever have access to either Unchained cards, Unchained monsters in your graveyard, or Unchained spell and traps, the Squirmer pretty much just becomes a hand trap because you can use that to access Yama and then Yama to like interrupt your opponent. This also combo extends into Yama as well. So if you already have an established board and you want to just trigger Yama to just summon another guy, you can just special this, blow it up, and do the same thing. The other effect this card does, and the other reason this is relevant, and that is going to become more relevant with Nightmare Throne. In the graveyard, you can banish itself from the graveyard and special summon from the graveyard a fiend with 0/0 attack and defense that is not Grave Squirmer. The only other one we have in this deck is Labrynth Kuklok. but Labyrinth Clue Clock is pretty much essential in this deck. So if you have Clue Clock in your like rotation, Squirmer pretty much becomes two extenders, one for itself and one for Clue Clock. So that's the other interaction with the Squirmer. And that gets us to explanation behind Nightmare Throne. So Nightmare Throne, a lot of Yubel players already know about this card, but for the non-Yubel players, uh, essentially upon activation, you add or destroy a fiend with 0/0 attack and defense. So this can add or blow up the Squirmer, or it can add or blow up the Cool Clock. So that's really cool in this deck because now you have an option to play more Cool Clocks in your deck without needing to actually play Cool Clock. So now Nightmare Throne, alongside any furniture, pretty much starts all your Labrynth plays. Throne plus Ariana also starts all your Labrynth plays as well. Uh, just having access to Cool Clock from this field spell is really neat. If you already have Cool Clock or you have Cool Clock in rotation, this can just add the Grave Squirmer and that serves as a extender. In the future, I might experiment with this card with other like Fiend 0/0 monsters. The DDD engine is one example. The Summoning Beast, Secret Beast monsters are also another example. The Yubel monsters can also be played in this deck. I chose not to play with the Yubel cards because I really didn't have a lot of experience with deck construction when it comes to fitting that engine. I know some people play Yubel like mixed with Unchained, and that's its own hybrid. But I felt like the Labrynth cards were just way too strong to not play them, and I didn't want to like go a lot over 40 with this deck because this deck does have a fair number of bricks. My losses this weekend were pretty much to bricking with this deck, which is very unfortunate. 2 out of those 3 matches that I bricked, I almost had the game, but I had to play perfectly in order to not lose those matches. And sadly, I did not play perfectly, which means that I got punished. And me breaking actually did not help with that. But in the future, I still think I will play the Throne engine. I might just like lower the number of Squirmers into something else because you drawing multiple Squirmers is not that good, even though it can get you to Yama. The other thing that Nightmare Throne does that is really cool is that if you have your Unchained engine into rotation, this card just becomes free fodder for Chiyama's effect. So if you have Chiyama in your graveyard but you don't want to blow up your own spell and traps, you can just blow up the Nightmare Throne and special the Chiyama because the throne serves no other purpose besides just adding the 0/0 if you don't play Yubel cards. So that's it for that engine. So for non-engine, I chose 4 spells and 4 traps. The 4 spell cards were 3 talents and 1 call by. So heading to this event, I had a hunch that a lot of people were going to be still heavily on hand traps, and I also was correct on that. I got hand trapped a lot of times. I got Ash Blossom a fair amount. I got FF Veiler a fair amount. I got Impermed once or twice, which is unfortunate because Imperm does not work with talents. It does work. It doesn't work with call by either. However, I did get monster hand trapped more than enough times, and this kind of performed well for me. The number one reason why this is really good is because once you see their opponent's hand, if you see that they're not on Nibiru, you can pretty much combo extend without any fear. If you see that they have way too many hand traps and they will stop you from playing, you just take their engine card away from them and just make them so they have to worry about your interactions on the next turn. This deck is very strong against hand traps, which is one reason I played like this particular variant. If it was regular Labrynth, you'd be struggling against hand traps a fair amount, but the Unchained version really doesn't care about hand traps that much, unless like they use high impact hand traps or they use like multiple hand traps like at once and your hand is like kind of mediocre, which did happen, sadly. The last four traps uh, are three cannons and transaction rollback. I guess I'll explain the cannon first. I feel like this is the most impactful normal trap that you can play in this deck. There are other impactful normal traps, and this sadly does not trigger your Labrynth effects. However, the value behind this card is very, very strong. The fact that this is not once per turn is also fairly strong because if you draw multiples, you can pretty much pick apart almost any board your opponent makes on you, like burying their negates. Sadly, I did not see this card the entire weekend. I only saw it one match against Voiceless, and I lost that game because they ashed my Welcome Labrynth, which kind of came in clutch because if that Welcome Labrynth would have resolved, I probably would have won that game. And I'll talk about rollback now. So, some people are on and off on this card in Labrynth Index. I think in this particular variant, this card is phenomenal. If you drew it and have no access to your furniture, one thing that you can do is pop it with Shiyama's effect, or pop it with Aruha, or pop it with like Sharvara, and this just goes to a grave, and you already have your value that way. The one other thing about transaction rollback, and the reason I only played one copy of it in this deck, is that if you are in a position where your opponent is trying to Lightning Storm or Feather Duster you, which you will see that a lot happening because Tenpai Dragons pretty much main those cards. What you can do is you can flip a normal trap while you have Lady Labrynth, and just have Lady Labrynth just set your rollback and have it get popped by Lightning Storm or Duster. And now your opponent wasted their Duster and Lightning Storm, but they still have to worry about your trap cards because this is in the grave. The other thing this card does is just let you play through hand traps as well. So if you get hand trapped on Welcome or Big Welcome or like your Unchained cards, you can just banish this and just copy them again because this copies their effects, not their activation conditions. Um, and that's pretty much it for the rollback. I only played one because I did not want to draw multiples of this card. I tested multiples and I kept drawing multiples a lot. So I just felt like the one rollback is just fine. I have enough ways to get it into rotation in this deck anyway. But yeah, that's it for the main deck. I think it's 41. Things that I would change in this deck. I do want to play more trap cards. Like just having the engine traps and the cannons is not enough. I pretty much lost. I lost 2 games against Tenpai. Well, 2 matches, but 2 games in one match I lost because I did not see any of my trap cards, and I had no access to my trap cards at all. If I had at least 1 or 2 trap interactions, I pretty much had enough to stop them because part of my board ended on the Wave Caesar, and you'll see it. Well, I guess we can talk about the extra deck now since we're showing Caesar, but in the main deck, I would definitely play more trap cards. One trap that I thought about that I wanted to play was the Black Goat, but at last minute, Black Goat got replaced by Talents, so I might swap out Talents from the main deck or play lesser copies of Talents and just play more copies of trap cards. Uh, there are other things that we can do in this deck to optimize it a little bit, but for now, this is the list. Now let's go to extra. So, 3 Yama, one Rage this time, one of Anguish, one Abom, one Muck, one Griffin, one Goddess. Uh, One card that I chose to play in this deck now, as opposed to the last time we built this list, is a Relinquish Anima. This does come up because of Brave Squirmer and because of Ku Klux. So you can combo extend into this. I'm also playing the SP, which is normal for last time. I'm also playing two Typhons this time. Um, the number one reason for playing multiple Typhons is in the future, like if you face, Konami did a phenomenal job by banning Savage and Baron, but that doesn't mean that you won't see more oppressive decks that are very combo based, and you will see like other problematic boss monsters. So Typhon is there pretty much for those. If you face Branded, this is also a check for Branded. This also is a check for like other strategies. There is a melodious version of like Voiceless Voice, so this card is really good for that version as well. Melodious is going to be played as an engine moving forward. It did top the like last YCS, so people are catching on into that. So this is also really good against that as well. The last two is King Wave Caesar and Chaos Angel. I think the extra deck is fine. I might want to play a second Rage again, just because there are some specific lines where it can get to multiple Rage. And I did lose one match to Tenpai Dragons because they Magnamut their only copy of Rage in my graveyard. And that kind of gave them a lot of advantage. Some people think that you don't go through 3 Yamas. You do go through 3 Yamas in this deck a lot. There are some lines and combos that goes through 2 of them in one turn. So just having access to Yama is very exceptional. In the past, I used to not summon this card a lot. However, now against Tenpai, I'm summoning this a lot because I don't want to interact with Tenpai in the battle phase. I want to interact with their monsters before I go into the battle phase, and this is one card that helps you do that. Abomination. This rarely comes up. However, I did in testing. I did face against a Buster Blader deck, and this card kind of came in clutch because if you don't know how the Buster Blader deck works, their fusion monster is essentially Baguska. Also against Baguska, you can also summon this card and just like try to break their field, but this deck doesn't struggle against Baguska at all. One card I did not summon all weekend, and I might even cut it, is the Nightmare Griffin. In theory, Nightmare Griffin sounds really good because you can just like lock a lot of your opponents. Tenpai cannot play through this card if you summon this. Same with Voiceless, and same with like a few other decks. But I did not summon this card a lot, or at all. This might get replaced. I did summon Underworld Goddess. In the past, I used to not summon it a lot, but it did come up like 3 to 4 times. It came up against Voiceless, it came up against Tenpai, it comes up against like the Melodious decks. This card is very, very phenomenal. In the future, I might still stay on 2 Typhons. Like, I every time I summon Typhon and like my opponent tries to get rid of it, they just try to spam the board again, and you just punish them with that second one, and then it just becomes really hard for them to like play the game. Also, this is a Fiend type monster, so it does not conflict with any of your restrictions. So that's it for extra. I guess I can show you a side deck. I think it's very important to show you a side deck because there are some cards here that just influences this deck. Shoutouts to Abraham Rivera. He used to play like Labrynth in the past. He did suggested some cards that I play in my side to be played in my main deck, and I'll get to those explanations. But yeah, I started playing Mudora and Keldo. These cards did nothing. In theory, I thought about siding it for Voiceless, but I don't think you need these cards for the Voiceless matchup. Snake Eye Fire King is not that popular anymore. This might be helpful against Melodious, but you don't worry about that deck as well, at least with these cards. So in the future, this might get cut. One card I did decide was Dark Ruler no more. And to pair with the Dark Ruler, I did play Evenly Mashed. And shoutouts to Danny Rodriguez. He was playing Melodious Voiceless. I broke the entire board with opening these two cards. It kind of feels unfair, but it is part of the game. You kind of need these cards like these against like those very high ceiling decks, even though you have Typhon in your extra deck. Some boards are just way too oppressive, and the problem is not those boards being oppressive themselves; is them having follow up. So you finding an easy way to break their board while also giving yourself enough resources so you can play on your opponent's next turn is very very essential. I played Feather Duster because of the same reason. Uh, every game 2 and 3, I side this in against Tenpai because I don't know if they're gonna make me go first or not. Some players have opted for them to go first because this deck is very very scary against that deck, and they pretty much don't want to give me a turn 1 because if they give me a turn 1, they're going to lose to like whatever the deck naturally does, and they're going to lose to these cards. And this deck is known for playing Dimensional Barrier, so if they essentially just avoid giving you a turn 1 to avoid these cards being flipped on them. So my theory is whether I go first or second, I still say I side these 4. Because in the end, what you can end up doing by that is that uh, if they go first, their turn 1 is not that strong. They usually end on Seal's Pass, so you can play through Seals and then just set up for the next turn. The other card that also helps you do that is Skill Drain. So Skill Drain is also playing this deck. In the future, I might main this. Same with Barrier. Like these cards could be played in the main deck. That's when I was talking about like playing more regular traps in the deck or just playing more trap cards in general. Uh, these cards really overperformed for me post side whenever I saw them. And yes, your opponent might have removal for them, but like, what if they don't have removal? In the past, I was very reluctant on playing Barrier in the main deck because every time I tried Barrier in the main deck, I just get paired up against a strategy that does not lose to D-Barrier at all. Like, I've been faced against Snake Eye Fire King, I've been faced against, like, Salamangreat, Horus, Bestial Turbo, like, you name it, Unchained. Historically, I have, like, just gotten shafted every time I play Shifter in the main. However, at this particular event, almost every deck I faced was weak against Barrier. So this is just a small PSA. Whether it's in the main or side, this card should be in your deck this format. And the last card was Rivalry. In the future, I might play Alder Floodgates. I might play like Gozen or and Tisibu. The reason you do that is because this deck thrives in the grind game. Like if you put your opponent in a simplified game state, you don't care that you yourself are in a simplified game state. Like the TCB example is you are locking yourself into fiends, like only summoning once. But against Tenpai Dragons, if you flip like TCB on them, they will pretty much lose because your resources are stronger than theirs if they don't combo off. The other thing that uh, like these cards do is that they play through the Tenpai Field spell because the Tenpai Field spell only protects them from activated effects, not from lingering effects. So just like flipping these floodgates on them just really halts the turn entirely. But yeah, that's it for deck report. It was a pretty lengthy one, but it's been a while since I played this deck. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in like me doing updated combo guides with this, because I know that the Nightmare Throne engine is kind of fairly new, and there are some lines in this deck that are slightly different because of the Nightmare Throne engine. Outside of that, like the deck is fundamentally the same as the last one that you saw involving this particular set of cards. Uh, More videos coming soon. I am like having a tougher time editing because I am working on a reset PC at the moment. So be patient with me. Outside of that, keep practicing and keep dueling.